Death Must Die is a pretty cool bullet heaven game that's inspired by the likes of Hades and ARPGs such as Diablo. And if you're planning to get into it for yourself, here are a few basics that you might need to know. Now, if you haven't decided for sure whether you want to play the game or not, do check out my review before coming back to this video. And if you want to know more content, such as builds for Death Must Die, or other great games that I find interesting, be sure to get subscribed, leave a like while you're down there, and for now, let's get into things. Each round begins by giving you a quick tutorial in the form of what everything does. So you move, you aim and attack, you want to dodge the enemy's abilities with the red cones, and you can even turn on auto attack. But you'll note there's something interesting here. Getting hit is bad, especially since health recovery is pretty rare and comes in the form of things like wells. You have a dash, which you can use to avoid enemy abilities more effectively, and you can attack including while moving. But while you're attacking, you slow down. So, in general, it's better to move quickly when you need to dodge stuff, or if you need to get somewhere, and use your dashes pretty liberally, but then slow down and kill enemies so that you can get experience, or if you're very lucky, item drops. Now, in addition to both the attack you start with and the dash, later on, with God Blessings, you will be able to enhance these by leveling up. For example here, Vengeful Strike is what I get to enhance my auto attack from the goddess Summer, whereas Trail of Fire would enhance my dash to leave a path of flame behind. Last up, there's Meteor Shower, an auto-cast spell which would cause meteors to rain down from the sky. I mean, that sounds pretty good, so let's go with it for now. And you'll see meteors start to rain down and decimate the skeletal forces. The reason being slowed down is kind of problematic, will be important in just a moment. For now, I wanted to talk about another feature of the game's attacks. You can attack ranged enemies, assuming that your timing is good enough, to destroy their incoming projectiles. Do this to gain an advantage, just be careful you need to attack in the direction that you're facing, which as you can see here, leaves you vulnerable from behind. When you die, the run comes to an end, but don't worry, not everything is lost. Instead, you'll get to start a new run from your base. And for every 3 successful or failed runs in the beginning, you unlock a new character. Another important part of the early game is managing your collectibles. For example, this Stone of Experience gives me 60% increased experience gain. Therefore, I'm going to level up much faster than I otherwise would have. And as you can see, I killed a few skeletons, already leveled up. Coming over here, we have a different type of collectible, the Tomb. When you click this, it gives you a random item, most of which are garbage, but some of which can be very valuable. Personally, I like to classify these as minor and major collectibles. Just like how you can get a lot of these buffs as random drops from killing enemies as well, although it is fairly rare and increased via the pickup stat. The more minor collectibles around the map give you a small bonus like 8% increased attack damage or 60% increased experience gain, whereas the more major ones offer a choice. Personally, one of my favorite minor or so-called minor collectibles is the Stamina Shrine, because this removes the attack move penalty. I can go at full speed, slashing my way through the skeletons, which is really, really good and helps level up much faster. Do be careful about leaving EXP crystals behind. You can always go back for them, but sometimes that will prove very difficult. This is an example, the Shrine of a Swan, of a major event. I can either test my virtues, where I'll be deemed worthy or not, or just say it's a dumb bird and move on. I'm going to test my virtues, and I was deemed virtuous, so I gain a small bonus. If I'd been deemed corrupt, I would have instead lost some luck. Now, the Withering Tree is another example of a very interesting event. I can choose either one. Atrophy. I gain less experience, but more spell damage and spell area. Or, all of my skills offered are Novice, meaning the lowest possible rarity, but I level up much, much faster. This might be good if, for example, I had a lot of gear that allowed me to increase skill rarity later. Or Writhe, where I lose all luck, but my spells gain +2 projectiles. This might be good for a spell build that's heavily reliant on projectiles. These choices can absolutely impact your run to the point where it's ended or until it takes you to victory. A great example of this is if you have a lot of base skills already built up, then grabbing Engulf effectively has no penalty. And if you're not a luck-reliant build, then gaining +2 spell projectiles is basically free. Atrophy, there's always a downside, but the upside could outweigh it since 22% damage and 33 area is nothing to scoff at. Now, similar to Hades, leveling up grants you a short conversation with one of the gods, and then they offer you 3 different blessings. In this case, there's Merciful Strike that modifies my attack, causing the attacks to become stronger and weaken enemies. I can then hit L2, or I believe it's Alt-Shift on the keyboard to see more information. Weakened enemies deal 30% less total damage. Alternatively, I can alter my dash to become Celestial Wings, where I have the reduced attack movement penalty for its duration. Or last up, I could take Protection, which is a passive spell buff that increases my armor, making me tankier. For now, I'll go ahead and grab Merciful Strike because I need some damage. Your choices very much define what sort of build you play in Death Must Die. You want a really strong auto attack enhancer on an auto attack based build, whereas your auto attack doesn't matter so much on a spell build, and some spell builds trigger over time, others trigger on hit, which would require the luck stat, or based on the number of attacks that you make, which would require the attack speed stat. So there's a lot more to building than it first appears, just based on characters. And your gear does play a factor, as does the sign you pick for your character, but I'll get into that more later. As you can see, I've leveled up again, and this time I could either take Celestial Wings or bring Merciful Strike to level 2, increasing my damage. So let's do that and keep killing some skeletons. This time, instead of encountering Lady Justice, I've encountered Winter, Goddess of Cold. And she's offering me different things. Unlike Hades, a god will never offer to replace an existing blessing. So now that I've chosen my attack modifier, I'll never get an attack modifier from Winter or whichever other god or goddess is offered in the run, as you're offered access to 3 total in any given run, plus the Moirai Fates. In this case, maybe I want to be a spell build, so I'll take Blight, an autocast spell that automatically triggers every 5 seconds and deals its damage. Alternatively, if I wanted to go more off my own attacks, I could go something like Ring of Frost, which triggers for every 9 attacks that I make. Now here, something interesting has happened. I'm being offered to level up my Merciful Strike yet again, or I can take an adept version of either Reprisal or Celestial Wings. Because yes, blessings have different rarities. The options that you're given when choosing a blessing is either A, you can pick up a new blessing, B, you can level up an existing blessing, or C, rarely, you can increase the rarity of your existing blessing. So there might be an option to take my Merciful Strike, level 3, from Novice to Adept, which would not only preserve any levels I had invested into it, but significantly increase the scaling, because the higher rarity of a blessing, the better scaling that it generally has. And as a general rule of thumb, I would say it's better to have a few high-level blessings than a lot of low-level blessings, though some are definitely one-point wonders, like the Dash blessing that I just picked up. The blessings you encounter are divided into the following rarities. The lowest is Novice. This has a white icon color and tends to have the lowest scaling and lowest overall values. Then you have Adept, which is blue. These are still fairly common and easily enhanced with gear. After that is Expert. Expert blessings tend to be fairly rare and have a dark purplish color. Many of them offer far more powerful scaling than the previous rarities. After that is the extremely rare Master and the insanely rare Legendary. Master has the best scaling, which means the most damage or the highest defense. Normally, you are not able to increase the rarity from Expert to Mastery. That requires a special stat on your gear. Last up, Legendary boons only spawn on Master offers, which is why they're exceedingly rare, and instead of offering a normal boon effect, it's something entirely unique. Many Legendary boons are entirely run-defining, so you should pretty much always take them when you're offered them. Currently, the following gods will attempt to aid you in defeating death. Summer, the goddess of fire, who focuses on inflicting a damage over time burn on your enemies. She also has access to a lot of powerful spells. Crom, the god of conquest, who's all about things melee, such as knocking your enemies back. Mort, the daughter of death, who specializes in curses, and also has quite a few minion options. The Moirai, or Fates, which give bonuses that generally tend to be overarching rather than modifying a single skill. A lot of blessings from the Fates are also more powerful than their counterparts, such as giving you access to additional projectiles or increased maximum life. Then there's Winter, the goddess of cold, who specializes in chilling and freezing your enemies. Her damage output tends to be a little bit lower, but the quality of life offered by just preventing something from moving or acting is, quite honestly, unmatched. You have Time, a god that focuses around gems and experience gain, which makes him very, very valuable. Lei Gong, the K-pop themed god of lightning, who gives you a lot of damage and spell trigger effects. And then Lady Justice, who not only has well-rounded damage, but quite a lot of defenses as well. You'll be able to interact with 3 of these in an average run, plus the Fates, leading to quite a lot of different builds and combinations. It's pretty safe to say that within a given run, your blessings generally determine the outcome. But between runs, and for run consistency, the game's meta progression system, which is your gear, is far more impactful. More about that in a later section. For now, let's go over some of the basics of clearing the map and progressing. Now, early on, you begin by fighting regular enemies. These skeletons really aren't that much of a threat. As long as you attack them directly, they'll die in 1, maybe 2 hits, depending on your gear, of course, and you're able to deal with them pretty darn easily just by walking at them and attacking. Now, starting at a minute 30, the first elite spawns. These are the enemies denoted by the little skulls. They often have slightly more complicated mechanics, such as the skeleton archer, who attempts to run away from you while shooting at you from a distance. Defeat them and you'll get loot, or a treasure chest that gives you a level up, often both. At 4 minutes, and at fixed intervals after that, black flames will appear, restricting your movement. This is a gauntlet event, or a boss battle. At the 4-minute mark, it's a gauntlet event. These slimes will spawn in various waves, and you need to kill them. Now, once you have a little bit of gear and a few powerful blessings, this isn't going to be too challenging, as none of the slimes individually have a lot of health. But if you're lacking on AoE damage, this can be very problematic, as there are many of them. As you can see right now, my auto attack isn't doing all that much because Chains of War is cleaning them up without issue. However, if I was relying on auto attacks alone, it would be very likely that I take stray hits as I'm attempting to target a slime in front of me, and I get hit by one that's behind me. This is in part due to the fact that auto-attacking slows my movement speed. Starting at the 7-minute mark, you encounter the game's first boss, a pair of gargoyles called the Baron's left hand and the Baron's right hand. These two can be especially challenging if you lack the range to safely attack them, because you'll notice that the Baron's right hand often has a triple spike attack that is quite annoying at close range, though you can definitely dodge it by staying in between the spikes. Should you manage to defeat one or both gargoyles, you will get a guaranteed item drop along with a chest that gives you a boon. I find that the Baron's left hand is a little bit harder to deal with than the Baron's right hand, although boons from Winter are a really good way to freeze it solid and get in some good damage. With the Baron's down, or at the very least, his hands cut off, well, it's time to keep progressing, and this same pattern will repeat. New elite, followed by new gauntlet encounter, followed by new boss fight. So here you have the campfire, where you can swap between characters, which remember, every 3 gameplay attempts in the beginning will unlock a character until you have all 5, or their signs. Signs are tied to in-game achievements. Most of them are fairly easy, but some, like Nixie's, complete the sign of a grasshopper, where you need 4 dashes, are quite difficult. So to start off with, Averon, the knight character. His sign of a hero gives you 17% attack damage every 3 levels, maxing at 170% at level 30. This makes Averon a strong choice for auto-attack-based builds. You also have the most beginner-friendly sign, or one of them, Sign of a Chosen One. When you take damage, become invulnerable for 3 seconds. This can't occur more than once every 10 seconds. So if you take a small hit, and then take a really big hit, you can negate the damage from a second larger hit. Sign of a Cat, you gain 8 revivals, but have minus 333% maximum life. You'll die very, very easily, but hey, at least when you die, you just come back over and over and over again. With Sign of a Guardian, you gain passive armor up to 180, which is a very significant, like 50 or 60% damage reduction at level 30. This is really good and again, beginner friendly. Last up, Sign of a Disciple. all blessings are at least Adept rarity. Your Adept rarity bonus is converted to Expert at 100% of the rate. So if you want much better blessings, Averon with Sign of a Disciple is the way to go. Next we have Kront with Sign of a Tornado, where you gain attack area every 3 levels. Personally, I haven't found this one to be super useful. Sign of the Earthquake allows you to lock down enemies provided you're able to break their barrier. Permanently stunning something is a good way to make it useless, but sometimes the fight is about getting there and not locking it down. Now, I do quite like Sign of a Tsunami, making Kront into a powerful auto-attack based build. On the other hand, if you want to really go all in, pick Sign of a Meteor. This converts his armor to attack damage at a rate of 1.2% per 1 point of armor. Unfortunately, this also makes Kront incredibly squishy, where empowered boss attacks will take out half of his health or easily kill him. So it's big risk, but maybe big reward. With Sign of a Mountain, you can't regenerate life, but you have plus 222, which is a very significant bonus. Next we have Maris, my favorite character personally. Maris's default sign, Fire, gives you increased spell damage. This is great for spell trigger builds that have high passive damage. If you want to be more active, Sign of a Helper causes your missiles to automatically lock onto enemies and increases your attack damage. Look for extra projectiles for shotgunning fun. With Sign of Time Space, you have infinite pull range, so shards automatically get collected, but -1 dash and minus 30% dash cooldown. You'll dash more frequently, but can't dash twice, which makes it a little difficult to get yourself out of sticky situations. Sign of a Hydra is another very powerful spell-focused effect, giving spells +2 projectiles with no downside. And lastly, Sign of a Summoner increases your summon damage, which isn't very good without very specific builds or items, so I don't play it too often. Nixie, you have Sign of a Viper, gain 10% attack speed for every 3 levels. This is very fun and super fast. With Sign of a Thread, you deal 500% more damage when striking enemies below 20% life, effectively deleting the last 20% of their health. Now, I don't yet have Sign of a Grasshopper because you need 4 dashes to unlock it. If you do though, you'll get +1 dash, and dash has a longer cooldown. It's honestly not worth the effort in my opinion, but hey, you might think differently. Then you've got Sign of a Thief, pickups drop 1,000% more often. This is surprisingly good as you get a lot of little bonuses like unlimited attack while moving, or extra EXP and straight up invulnerability or healing. Last up, Sign of a Rabbit, 13% luck every 3 levels. Very good for builds with trigger effects. Last but certainly not least, we have Scotty the Warrior, who starts off with 16 movement speed every 3 levels, maxing at 160. Great for being highly mobile on the battlefield. Or Sign of the Apprentice, which is arguably the most powerful sign across any character in the game, because a random skill will gain +1 level for every 2 levels you gain, effectively meaning you get 50% more experience. This is very good at leveling up powerful blessings. Sign of a Cosmos, you apply a random status from a pool of 8. Each has a separate 6% proc chance, which isn't nearly as bad as it sounds at first, because each has an individual proc chance, so around 50% of the time you're going to be applying a status, but because it's random, it's still not the best, to be honest. With Sign of a Beast, a White Raven fights alongside you. This is another summoner build, and unlike Maris, it feels pretty darn weak since it's very hard to scale for Raven's damage. And then last up, Sign of a Lizard gives you life regen, which is a very comfy boon. 3.5 life per second might not sound like that much. Trust me, it is. It takes a lot of investment to get 3.5 life regen per second, and providing you have the defenses, you can tank a terrifying amount of things with this. If you ever want to know how to unlock a character's sign, then check the Scrivener. So on Averon, Sign of a Hero, the unlock condition is kill 500 skeletons with Averon. For Sign of a Guardian, defeat the Baron, the last boss of a first level with Averon. For Sign of a Chosen One, defeat the Gargoyles. Because Averon is the starting character, a lot of his stuff is very beginner focused. Sign of a Disciple, you have to defeat the Baron with each character. That's Averon, Maris, Nixie, Kront, and Scotty. Lastly, for Sign of a Cat, die 9 times. On Maris, Sign of Fire, you just deal a bunch of damage. You'll get this one almost automatically. Sign of a Hydra, get 8 different auto-cast blessings. The way I would do this is heavily target a god or goddess that has a lot of auto-cast options. To do this, I would suggest starting with either Lady Justice or Time. After you do that, get any other god or goddess and pick everything autocast. You'll probably brick your run, but hey, at least you get Sign of a Hydra. Sign of a Helper, defeat the Chatty Skeleton, the first elite, 33 times. Since he comes back several times during a run, this isn't too difficult. Sign of a Summoner, get 40 summons. I suggest going with Mort for skeletons to do Sign of a Summoner. And Sign of Timespace, defeat the Necromancer, the third boss, with Maris. On Nixie, you have Sign of a Viper, defeat the Gargoyles in under 20 seconds. I know that sounds really, really difficult. A couple things to keep in mind. You can get a shrine for 100% increased damage temporarily. This will make it much easier to burst them down. And number 2, Nixie has many builds with prodigious single target damage, making this quite a bit easier than it at first seems. Sign of a Thief, win an attempt at 3 difficulty or higher with Nixie. Sign of a Thread, deal a total of 2,000 critical damage. That one will happen pretty much automatically. Sign of a Rabbit, win an attempt with Mort's Serendipity Blessing, which increases your luck. And Sign of a Grasshopper, get 4 dashes. Yeah, I've never gotten over 3 because it's a very rare blessing. I'll get it someday. On Krant, Sign of Tornado, kill 25 enemies with a single strike. If you have enough AoE, your spell will do this automatically. Sign of a Meteor, defeat 50 shielders. That just happens over time. Sign of the Earthquake, destroy an elite enemy's barrier with a single strike from Krant. Focus on crit, get a blessing for 100% increased damage, and kind of go all in on your DPS. You should get this in no time, though you may brick your run in doing so, and you'll probably also get Sign of a Tsunami at the same time, provided that you're able to crit, since you only need to deal 400 damage with a single hit critical strike. Last up, Sign of a Mountain, defeat the Necromancer. You'll get this as you progress through the game. On Scotty, Sign of a Wyvern, traverse distance. You'll get that playing automatically. Sign of a Beast, kill 25 summoners. Those are the enemies that show up as an elite early on and summon skeletons. Sign of the Apprentice, level up to 30 with Scotty. Once you have a really good run, you'll get this, and that will lead to many more really good runs. Sign of a Lizard, heal 999 life. As far as I know, this doesn't have to be done all in one run, so it shouldn't be too difficult as you play the character. And finally, Sign of a Cosmos, apply 5 different statuses within an attempt. If you get Summoned Winter, this will probably happen on its own. So last up, gear, stats, and meta progression. Because meta progression in Death Must Die works a little bit differently and is mostly contained to your items. Items come in a variety of different rarities, starting with Simple, that has really low stats on it. Common, which can have a couple more stats, but still isn't very good. Rare, where you're getting better. I'd say Rare is the minimum threshold of item you should equip once you have something in every slot. After Rare is Epic. Epic items tend to have pretty good stats and are viable even late into the endgame. And finally, Mythic, the best of the best and the items that you should aim for. There's additionally one other extremely rare category of item, which is Unique. Unique things do just one weird random effect, such as the Belt of Bob, a unique waistguard that gives 50 armor at epic rarity. Now, currently in early access, item tier doesn't do anything, but if there's tier 1, I'm going to guess there's tier 2, and that's probably unlocked by completing later stages. Different characters wear different types of items. So, Maris and Nixie wear light armor, meaning their armor rating's going to be much lower. Scotty wears medium, and Krant and Averon wear heavy, making them the tankiest by default. The different item slots also have unique stats that kind of go with what you'd expect. So boots give you movement speed. A weapon increases your damage. And gloves give you shard pull area so you can get that juicy experience. There are also certain rare stats that make your runs much easier. For example, skill rarity upgrade means I could take a novice blessing and upgrade it to adept far more easily. Whereas a revival means I get to mess up and die and then don't get punished for my mistakes. Oh yeah, and then you have something like this where you just get a pet dragon and the dragon kills stuff for you, which is absolutely awesome and my favorite part of the gear and itemization system. So if you feel like you aren't making quick progress in Death Must Die, it's likely because your items are holding you back. There's 2 ways to get better items. Number 1 is go around looting everything and defeating as many bosses as you can consistently. The other is turning up difficulty at the Star Crux, which will increase the rarity of items dropped. Once I turned the difficulty up all the way to 30, I started getting way more mythic items. And sometimes it is better to do this, though if the difference is die on the first boss with 30 or let's just say 10 difficulty versus killing Dracula with 0 difficulty, go with killing Dracula as his guaranteed item drops are far more impactful. Now, stats are also an important part of Death Must Die, and you can see most of them here in the stat sheets. So for God Blessings right now, I have a 32.8% chance to get an Adept offer, a 3.3 for Expert, 1.7 for Master, and 25.5 for Legendary only on Master offers. So this is 25.5 of 1.7, which is around 0.4%. Then I also have a decent chance that a god will offer me new blessings, a chance they'll offer to level up my blessings, and about a 21.6% chance that they'll up the rarity, in part because of my gear. I can see from how far away I pull in shards, my luck, which is a multiplier for chance-based god blessings, items, spells, and objects, meaning if you have a 17% chance to trigger and 100% luck, now it's 32. Then my dice. And dice are a really interesting part of Death Must Die, because this is what gives you true control over your build. When you banish a blessing, it will never appear again within that attempt, including all rarities and levels. So you could take a 1-point wonder and then banish it, and you'll never be asked to level it up again. Reroll, on the other hand, is the number of times that you can reroll a god's blessing, giving you new options from the god. So if you don't like the rarities or just don't like the options offered, hit it with a reroll. Alteration, on the other hand, changes to a different god, which if you haven't decided on the 3 gods for your run, can be any of the gods from the pool, whereas if you have decided, my experience is that it only rolls within the gods from your pool. Oh, and of course the fates. This also tracks things like passive experience, experience gain, and gold drops. Over here, you have some stats that determine your damage. So right now on Nixie, I haven't invested too much in most of my damage stats for spells because I've been playing a lot of auto attack builds with her. Whereas if I wanted spells, I'd want to get that spell damage and cast speed higher. Say like I'm doing on Maris. If you're ever wondering why your build isn't going too well, maybe it's because you're wearing caster gear and focusing on auto attacks or vice versa. I think the itemization system and meta progression therein is really how Death Must Die sets itself apart, and I look forward to how it advances as the game progresses through early access and on to release. Finally, we have the Star Crux, which controls the amount of difficulty and, to an extent, the items dropped. So here I have the outer circle, the game's first stage, selected. With ranks of Make Way, elite enemies have up to plus 90 movement, which isn't actually all that bad when they're running towards you, but can be quite annoying if you're a melee build and they're running away from you. You get 2 points each, which is kind of a judge of how impactful this is. The more points you get, generally speaking, the more dangerous it is. Now, bigger is better, elite enemies have up to 60% area. In a lot of cases, this is a fairly ignorable modifier that you can take pretty safely. 300, minions have damage in the last 3 minutes, which is either completely trivial or absolutely terrifying depending on your build. Having up to 80% increased damage doesn't matter if you're annihilating all of them effortlessly and exploding the entire screen. But all it takes is one mistake for you to get overwhelmed and killed instantly. With Llama Blessing, enemies have 2 extra projectiles. If you saw in some of the earlier footage where enemies were firing through projectiles by default, that's why, and yes, it does make things significantly more difficult. As does Instant Kill, where enemy projectiles are 35% faster. Honestly, with the number of times this has killed me, I think this should be worth 4 points rather than 2. Deathstruck, bosses have increased damage. If you're getting hit by bosses, it's kind of bad, and now it's about 60% worse. This effectively means your defenses don't really matter. You have to avoid boss hits. Bosses and elites having 2 extra projectiles. This one is 4, and yeah, it's an absolutely terrifying modifier. Only take this if you're very confident or truly insane. Last up, Borrowed Time, where boss fights are up to twice the length with 120% more life per rank. You can get up to 30 total points in difficulty modifiers, and your item rarity will be increased accordingly. So next time you want an extra challenge, turn on some or all of these modifiers. And so that's what you need to know about Death Must Die, from how the game itself plays out, to the way blessings, items, stats, and characters interact to form builds, and hopefully enough to pave your way to success. Remember, if you've set the difficulty too high in the Star Crux, you can always turn it down and try again on a higher difficulty later. Or if something just isn't working, maybe don't try to force an archetype and go with something that's highly synergistic. Just because Maris's Sign of a Helper is generally made to be an auto-attack build doesn't mean that you can't play it as a spell trigger build if you happen to get some really good triggerable spells from Leigang, Crom, and Summer. Going with synergistic blessings is almost always the better thing to do than trying to force something that just isn't working. Though if you feel like your build as a whole just isn't working and you're really not enjoying it, it's not the worst thing in the world to start over and try again in another run. Now, at least as of recording of this video, Death Must Die just recently entered early access, and I do expect that it's going to get a lot of development. However, I'm also guessing that a lot of what it does well is going to stay the same, and some of what it doesn't do quite as well, such as how some blessings and signs are just severely underpowered in comparison to others, will slowly be corrected for over time. We've already seen some patches, and I'm sure more are to come. But personally, I've had quite a lot of fun with this game. I think it brings a new and fresh take to the genre as a whole by combining elements from multiple other popular Bullet Heaven ARPG and roguelike games. And as a result, it's also just a little bit more complicated to get into, which is why I wanted to put together this beginner's guide. Since builds are a huge part of the game, I may be talking about some in the future. If that interests you at all, let me know down below, and do be sure to get subscribed so you don't miss those videos when they're uploaded. With that said, if you're looking for something else to watch, maybe check out my thoughts on some other ARPGs or other Bullet Heaven games. Alternatively, if you're still on the fence as to whether or not you should be buying Death Must Die, then check out my review where I go into a little bit more about why I think it's fun as opposed to just the mechanics of how it works in this video. Links to all of those will be up in the card and down below. But with that said, thanks for watching. A special thanks to my patrons and channel members, without whose support I really couldn't do this full-time like I do. And I hope to see you again sometime soon. Who knows, maybe the next time I'll see you, we'll actually be able to defeat death.